QuickBooks 2013. This is a brief introduction on QuickBooks and the various features. This is the home base page, and here you have the home page with the vendors, customers, and employees. Over here you have your banking section, and the one thing to bring to your attention at the very beginning is that this section is really for a cash basis taxpayer, where you're writing checks and making deposits, and you're writing checks when the money's going out the door, and when the checks come in the mail and you're making the deposit, you report the income here. Over in this section is the accrual basis, and the reason why I say the accrual basis is because we're going to be recording the income not when we get the actual cash or check, but when we send out the invoice. And also we're going to be reporting the expense when we actually get the bill in the mail, not when, for example, we would be writing the check. So this area over here is the accrual basis, and this is the cash basis. The things I'd like to talk about first are your views and editing. Here you have your preferences for your company, where you can set up how you would like the various features of QuickBooks to appear. For example, we'll look at later on reports and graphs, which is very important. And you'll oftentimes see when you first get started, all of your reports are on an accrual basis, even though you're on a cash basis. So you're constantly having to go into the report and modify it. This way you can go, for example, to your preferences and say, you know, I want all of my reports from the very beginning to be done on a cash basis. And you've got other preferences that you can look at as far as the billings, checking, and these are all different features that you may want to adjust as you go along. Here's like sales tax. Do you have sales tax? Well, if it's clicked yes and you're not going to have sales tax, you might as well turn it off, and that way that will take some of the extra paperwork out of creating a bill. The next feature I'd like to talk to you about is your chart of accounts, and let's take a look at the chart of accounts. Here you always hear about people having their chart of accounts and they're either happy with an account or they want to delete an account. Now the nice thing is about QuickBooks, when you go to set up a new company, it will try to walk you through these various features. So for example, let's say I want to set up a new account, and so I'll hit new, and the first thing it says, well, what kind of an account is it? Is it income or expense? There are other types of accounts. We can take a look at this really quickly, and these are like other assets. What would that be? Or other current assets, maybe like prepaid interest expense, something of that nature. Let's go ahead and just add an expense account, and you can see the types of expense accounts that they would consider. So let's add an account, and we'll call it, and you'll notice here it actually tells you what kind of an expense account or what kind of an account you're going to be opening, and that's real important. So we're going to have an account called framing expense. And we can put in the description, it's going to be the same, framing expense. Now, you'll notice here that there's something called tax line mapping. This is a wonderful part of what QuickBooks offers you, because now if you start to assign this particular expense, then you can link it directly to the tax return so that the data will flow directly from QuickBooks right over to the tax preparation package. Let's take a look at this just for a second. And here you can see this is being set up as a corporation. Now you say, well, what if I'm not a corporation? What will I do then? You can go ahead and go to company, and under company information, you can say, look, I'm not a 1120C corporation. For example, maybe I'm a 1120S corporation, and we'll change this. And then we come back over, and now the assignments are slightly different, but you need to have that correct form or that correct company information in there before you start assigning the various accounts. We're not going to do that right now, but I think that's a good feature for you to be aware of so that you can really streamline the amount of time you're saving in tax preparation and save the time for your accountant also. So now we've set up framing expense. We're going to save and close this. And here's framing expense. So you just set up a new expense account and you want to customize your chart of accounts, and that's how you can do that. Now in the same token, you can come down through here and you can see all of the various expenses that are here, and you're going, gee, I don't need all of these expense accounts. There's too many of them and I'd like to take some of them away. Well, let's just take away the framing expense, just how we added it. Let's go ahead and now we can go to that particular account and we can delete it. Are you sure we want to delete it? So that gives you an idea about your chart of accounts, how you can add accounts, edit the accounts, and this is down through this button here where you can add and edit or delete. So if we wanted to change, maybe I misspelled and I wanted to add, say, insurance workers' comp, then I could add that additional description. And then there it is. We've added that additional description. You can see it right here. Now remember, wherever you are, you can always get back to home base. So that gets us back to where we were originally, which is a good thing. Now, the next part I'd like to talk about to you is reports. And here you have the reports, and this is so fantastic. When I first got into public accounting, a client would have to send their reports, their bank statements, and their check stubs, and all of this out to their accountant, and maybe 2 months later they would get a report. But nowadays with this technology, you can get an income statement or a report at 2 a.m. in the morning for whatever period you want. Let's take a look at this. Here's profit and loss. And this is actually in the future, so we'll change it, and let's just go back to say 13, and this is 13 here, and let's see what that has. Oh, that was probably outside the database for this company, so let's go back to 17 and put that in there. But what I wanted to show you is that you have the option to customize the report. You can customize the dates, or you could take last fiscal year, you could take last month, you could take fiscal year to date, this fiscal year. Let's pick that and see what happens. Now remember how we talked earlier about cash to accrual? You'll notice, because under my preferences, remember when we did the preferences, that I set this up to be automatically my reports would be cash, so I don't have to go through here and click it all the time. Now you'll also notice here that I have an ability to compare with the previous year. So let's see what that looks like, and I can compare dollar amounts on the report. It'll take a second, and isn't this fantastic? Now you have the ability to see what the current year's numbers are, what last year's numbers were, and what the difference is. And this really helps you from a management point of view, because you can start to see, hey, why is there this change? Why is it this fiscal year our installation labor is $29,000 and last year it was just $1,000? Why has this expense gone up so high? This is really what accounting is supposed to be about, is to help management run their companies. And this is a tool that you can use to do this. The nice thing is you've also got a host of types of reports here about aging, about how long your receivables have been sitting out there and what needs to be collected. Let's take a look at another financial report. You've got your balance sheet here. And again, you have the option to customize the report as to what date you would like. And this is this fiscal year to date. We can take a look at the last fiscal year and see what was going on. And so you can see your various assets here. You have a lot of opportunities here. Now you'll notice it's on a cash basis, but take a look at this. I think this is really important. You notice you have an accounts receivable for $961.80. And really what that's telling you is there's an issue with accounts receivable, because on a cash basis, you shouldn't really be showing an accounts receivable. For example, if we look down here, you don't see an accounts payable. You have a current tax payable, sales tax payable, but no current accounts payable. Let's see, this is an accounts payable. I'm sorry, we do have an accounts payable, and that would make me curious also on a cash basis, because I shouldn't have either one of these. And this is what I wanted to go back and talk to you a little bit about. When you start with QuickBooks, it's best to focus in on just getting started on writing the checks and recording the deposits. Because what happens is oftentimes folks want to get ahead and they want to go ahead and start creating invoices, and that's fine. But what happens is that they'll create an invoice, and when it comes time, when the money comes in, instead of going through the normal process, this is where you would normally record the receipt. Instead, they record the receipt of the check here, and that throws off the accounts receivable system, and that's why you end up with either positive or negative numbers in your accounts receivable when you do a cash basis balance sheet. And the same thing happens up here. You'll enter a bill, and if you're going to be on a pure accrual system, then when the money is paid out, you need to pay it through here, through the pay bill system, not through write a check. If you pay this bill through write a check here, then it throws the whole accounts payable system out of whack, and it takes a lot of time to clean all that up. So the best thing to do when you're starting out is just to start out in this area right here and say, for example, we want to write a check. Well, what we want to do is you have to pick your bank account, okay? And you'll notice you don't have all of your charts of accounts. These are only the accounts that we told it that were bank accounts. And here we have a checking account. And for example, let's say we want to pay somebody. And we're going to pay the city of Bayshore. There's their address. It's already populated out. And the amount of money we're going to pay is, say, $500. And this could be composed of a couple of items. In other words, we paid them $500. There was a bond expense we had to pay, and that was only, say, $200 for the bond expense. And then on top of that, we, in the same check, had to pay them, say, an expense for licenses and fees. So here we are. Now we've got our check ready, and we're going to go ahead and save this. And we have two options. We can print it now, and then of course we have the check number that we have to think about, and then you have to see what is the latest number in the pre-printed checks that you have, or you can print it later. Okay, so those are your options, but this is how you start out, is just by basically getting the grasp of what it's like to write a check and how to print those out. Now let's go ahead, we've saved this, let's go back to home base. And if you look over here, you can look at your check register. And this is very similar to the check register that you had for your personal use. And here it is. These are all the checks that have been written in this account. Here's the city of Middlefield that we just put together, and it's sitting there waiting to be printed. Okay, so there it is. It's in your check register as an expense. We're going to go back to the home base now, and okay, now we're ready to write some checks, aren't we? And this is the check that's ready to be written, and we'll come back here, and now we're ready to print a check. And now we tell it which checks we would like to print. Now you can see that it's been quite a while since they've written checks in this example. By the way, I'd like to mention to you about QuickBooks is that they do have these samples. This is called Sample Larry's Landscaping, so that this gives you an opportunity to practice your QuickBooks before or along with your normal bookkeeping, so you can get a chance to see how an entry will look. And you can see here I can decide which checks I want to write or not write, okay? Or I can select all of them. Here we go. And I think there's some 42 checks that are sitting out there waiting to be printed at this point. So this person has waited almost for the entire year to write any checks. So those are your options on writing the checks. So we're going to go OK, and then of course remember that you would have to tell it what is the next check number in your series of checks. And of course you can always order checks. QuickBooks likes that. So let's go OK here. And then you'll notice you've got a selection of what kind of checks you're going to be feeding through your printer. Okay, it could be a voucher where you just have one check per sheet and there's an explanation of what this is for, or you could have a standard series which you have like 3 checks to a sheet. So those are all things that you need to look at before you go ahead and print out your first set of checks. The same thing works with recording deposits. In other words, the mailman brings in the mail today, and you've got a series of checks that have come in, and you can show which customer those came from and for which account. Most likely it's going to be a revenue account. Maybe it was a reimbursement on an expense, but most likely it's for a revenue. Here's money that we received from Adam's Candy Shop. Okay. Now, this is fantastic. You notice what this is saying is it's saying you're just about ready to create a problem in your accounts receivable system. Remember how I talked to you earlier about when you get a check that comes in, and instead of going through the normal processes, if you're on an accrual basis, you end up going through and making the deposit directly on the cash basis, that will mess up the books. Well, here QuickBooks is saying to you, wait a minute, we sent out a receivable, we sent out an invoice to this customer, and you're about to shortcut the normal system, and it's warning you not to do that. Okay, so what would we do? Let's take a look at this. Let's go back to our home base, and what we're seeing here is if we go, in other words, Adam's Candies has an invoice sitting out there, and we're saying that we just got a payment. Well, we don't want to record it here, we want to record it there. And what happens is we look at Adam's Candy Shop, and it's saying, oh, look at that. Here's that $133.13 I was about ready to record. It's actually been reported as a revenue through our accrual system, and we want to say, yes, we have received this money. So we'll say yes here, and that will clear off the receivable, and it'll report it as being collected. So we're going to go ahead and save and close. And if you wanted to, we could go over and look at your reports, and we could look at customers receivable, and we could look at customer balance detail, and there's Adam's Candy. Here was the original invoice when it went out, and here you could see that was the amount that was due, and then here we are today. We got the cash, the check that came in, and now the balance is 0. But that's why it's so important to keep track of how you billed the clients originally. Okay. Now you say, well, what if people just walk in the door? If they just walk in your store and they pay you this way, and you want to write a receipt, in that case you can create a sales receipt for walk-in traffic. There's also a feature to do statement charges. So this is for people who usually incur expenses on a regular basis, and you'd like to send them out, say, a monthly statement. So let's go back to the home base, and you can see how this flows through, and here comes the statement, and let's take a look and see what that's going to preview. And you can see there's quite a few of them that are previewing, but this gives you an idea of what the monthly statement would be for the candy shop. And of course we can take a look at the next page, and then if we wanted to, we could go ahead and print out all these statements to give the client a history of what's been happening in their account. Now you'll notice we'll go back to home base, and we've talked about this issue and we just saw with when we tried to make a deposit to Adam's Candy, where we should have made it through here because we had sent out an invoice. We took a look at that, and we've seen how to write a check. The other thing I'd like to talk to you about is every now and again you will need to write a journal entry. And what is a journal entry? A journal entry is where you need to make an adjustment. Say, for example, you sold a piece of equipment. You want to record depreciation expense, something that's not in the normal flow of activity. You go to the accountants section right here and make a journal entry. Now, if there's a mistake or an error in recording, maybe I've recorded it here instead of here, you're tempted maybe to make the correction by making a journal entry, but the best thing to do is to actually go back and to reclassify the cash receipts and to recharacterize it so it's treated correctly. Because if you just try to muscle this system or try to override it through a journal entry for these ordinary, typical daily activities, it will cause skews in the books or problems with the books. So the general journal entries are usually things that are done at the end of the year. For example, let's say you wanted to accrue the corporate income taxes. Okay, in that case, you could do that. Here is an example, entry A108, where they've gone ahead and in this entry, the owner, this is an interesting entry, before the company was even set up, had incurred some expenses on behalf of this new company. You may be in the same situation. You're just setting up your QuickBooks and you've said, hey, I just started my corporation in last month and I had expenses out of pocket that I incurred before that. This would be a perfect example where you would be doing a journal entry. Why? Well, we didn't even have any checks to write a check for these various expenses back then. So let's take a look and see. This person had paid some permits on a job and bought some material. And we said this was something that was equity that the owner had put in. So this would be a good example of a need for an accountant's journal entry. The company information we had talked about, and the items you can see here, we've got all the information. This is where the addresses on your invoices, all of these things show up. Also, I'd like to show down here, it asks you, remember how we were doing reports for fiscal year? Well, we need to tell it what its fiscal year or tax year. You have a choice, okay? You could be a September year. But remember, when you do that, you pick a September year or a September tax year, that all of your reports will be generated based on that information. So when you open this up, if you're saying, gee, why is it every time I ask for this fiscal year, it ends on August 31st? It's because over here in your company information, you need to go ahead and set this up. Just like we changed, remember how we changed from a C corporation to an S corporation? Same thing. So also you can put in your federal ID number and this other information so that when you're ready, say for example, to do your 1099s at the end of the year, you'll be ready. Let's take a look. Let's go back to home base just so we're back there. And here's your vendors, and we were just talking about 1099s, and this is another nice thing about this software, is you have the ability to go ahead and generate some of the year-end reports that you need. Now you'll notice down here one area that we haven't talked about, and that's employees. All right, and QuickBooks is so versatile as to the amount of information that it can handle and things that it can do. But maybe you're not interested in doing payroll through QuickBooks. Maybe you're using ADP, Paychecks, or some other service. Again, we get into the issue of complications, don't we? In other words, I wanted you to start out just by mastering this area, because once you get over here, you get into a whole new level of complexity. And again, particularly with payroll, you get into another level of complexity. And the problem or the issue with payroll is that if you get out of sync with the IRS or your local or state withholding, then all of a sudden you start getting all this correspondence about why your 941s are not tying in with your W-2s, or why is this happening, why not, why is that? And it just leads into you're spending all your time handling payroll. So there are many people who have QuickBooks who send their payroll out to ADP or Paychecks or some other company and use them, and then they would do what? An adjusting journal entry. When they get the payroll, they journalize the payroll activity for that particular month or pay period, they journalize it in, and that would be another good example of where you would use a journal. When we're taking a look here at preferences, we can take a look and say, okay, payroll and employees. And what's going on with payroll and employees? Well, you see, before, if you remember, we looked along the bottom, you had all those features, all those icons, because the system is ready to start doing payroll. Now remember, when you did your startup, when you did your questionnaires and starting it up, QuickBooks will ask you, are you going to have payroll? And if you say yes, then it lights up all those various little icons so you can do payroll. So, and you can actually do payroll with QuickBooks, and they have a good product, and it's very reasonable. But we're going to say no, we're not going to be doing any payroll, even though we might, but we're just not going to be doing any payroll through QuickBooks. And so it's kind of recalculating here a little bit. And now you can see basically we've done away with the payroll. So that's the nice thing about QuickBooks, is as you say certain things to it, it will turn on certain features so that it's sitting right here on your home base. I want to talk about the reports a little bit. I think one of the most important things about QuickBooks is reconciling. Whenever I sit down to look at a set of QuickBooks, I always, first of all, I'm very curious about whether the client has been reconciling the bank accounts. Okay, so I'll take a look and I'll look at previous reconciliations. Well, you can see here the statement ending date, there's nothing there. And anytime I see a set of QuickBooks going along that's not being reconciled monthly, it always puts a question mark in my mind, because you're saying, well, they're going along here, driving down the road, but we're never stopping and really tying into the bank. Now this is BB&T. Let's take a look at one of the other accounts. Remember, this is our other banking account. There's no reconciliation there either. So one of the most important features about QuickBooks is that you tie into the bank account, to the checking accounts. And you can see right now you're really not kind of unsure about the quality of the numbers in this QuickBooks, because this particular client's books have never been reconciled to the bank account. So we're going to cancel this just for a second. So when you go over here and you look at the check register, you're never quite sure whether this check register is representative of what the bank would say the expenses and revenues are. Well, what are we going to do? Let's go ahead and let's do a reconciliation to see how this works. Now this is an example, and it's going to be off a little bit, but I'll show you how it is off. And so our statement came in, and it's saying, okay, what is the ending balance as of November 30th in our example, 2017? And I'll just pick an arbitrary number just to show you how this works. Let's just say there was $50,000 in the bank account. And I'm going to go ahead and continue. In this particular bank account, we don't have any outstanding checks, so let me come out of here and pick another account so that we can show you how that works. We're going to reconcile, and we're going to pick checking here. And I think, yeah, we'll pick checking, and then we're going to go to continue. So we have two bank accounts. We have one account called BB&T and one called checking. And remember, if we wanted to, we could go back and rename that. But at any rate, if you can see on the left-hand part of the screen is all of the checks that are out there. Okay, and over here are deposits and other credits. Right now, we've highlighted that all the deposits have been received into the bank, and all of the checks have been received. Well, this part down here is a method to help you reconcile. Anytime you have a number here, it means that the books are out of balance. Most likely this has to do with the arbitrary number I put in for the ending balance. But what will happen here is we're going to unmark everything, and we'll unmark it's working in process, and we're going to let that work for just a little bit, and because there were a lot of numbers in there. So you can see the entire year. Well, you know why it wasn't reconciled. The entire year's worth of checks have never been reconciled to the ending balance. So very important to do this monthly. That's the main point, folks. And it's a two-step process. Basically, you're going to go and you're going to put in the ending bank number. Say it's the November 30th. You're going to put in the ending bank number. I'll put in another number. You can see how it changes. Let's say it was like $4,000. Okay, and then you go over here and you tell it which checks have cleared. Okay, and as you'll notice, as I check, here's the 234,525. As I check it, it changes, doesn't it? Every time it changes. So as we go through here, it adjusts itself. Remember, the books that you're keeping are not always exactly reflected in what the bank has, because you could have outstanding checks, you could have deposits in transit. So it's sort of like two people having a conversation. You and your QuickBooks are saying, hey, I wrote this check, but the bank is saying, gee, I don't see it, I don't see it. So you have to say, oh, I'm sorry, this check is still outstanding. And through this reconciliation process, through this talking process, eventually we will reconcile and bring this number down to 0. I'm going to leave this for right now, but that's very important. The other thing I'd like to show you, when we talked about reports, we talked about company and financial. We talked about customers and receivable. Let's take another look at that. Remember how we looked at Adam's Candy Shop? What you should also be doing monthly, not only should you be reconciling your cash account, you should be looking at these reports. If you're using the accrual basis, okay, if you're sending out bills and recognizing the revenue when you send out the bill, you need to go through here monthly and make sure these numbers look reasonable, that you don't have any errors, any type of a number that looks peculiar. Either it's very old, or you have, say, if this were a negative number, well, you know you can't have a negative. See here, see this negative? There was probably a problem here, and something had to be done to fix it, because normally you wouldn't have a negative receivable, would you? And that's why you have to go through these reports monthly and make sure that they look reasonable, that they look accurate. The same thing with vendors and payables, same type of thing. You need to go through and look. Let's take another look at another report. You need to go through and take a look at these reports to make sure that everything is making sense. Now, this would be one example. You could double click on it, and that's one of the nice things about these reports is they will expand to give you the detail of what's happened, the history of the money that we owe to Nolan's Hardware and Supplies. And that's true with all these reports. You can drill down. For example, we can drill down some more and even look at this particular, here's the bill. So if we have a question, we can go through the various levels very quickly to look at the detail. And you can also see over here, it's a running transactions of what have been recently happening with this account. So those are the issues that I want to mention to you. Over here, I always also want to bring your attention to the Help button. Isn't that fantastic? Because remember, QuickBooks, if you'll just type in, and I'm going to close some of these windows while we're waiting. If you have a question, let's say you want to void a check, okay? And then it's going to go off and look about what the results are, and then it'll give you an idea of what steps you need to take if you want to void a check. And here they are over here. So don't feel like you've just been put out there and there's no help for you. There is these other sources out there, and there's a couple of sources. Not only is there the help button there's also the community. In other words, that there's people out there that will, if you've got a particular question, there's a community of people out there who can help you with some of these various issues. So don't forget your help button. So we've talked about the help, we've talked about reports and banking. One other thing I'll mention to you, and this is again, gets into another area of complication, and that's credit cards. Nowadays, so much of what we're doing isn't by check, but it's by credit card. And QuickBooks offers a wonderful feature actually to download your credit card activity directly right into QuickBooks. So over here, we can enter the QuickBooks charge one item at a time. Okay, I went to the gas station, I went to Amoco, and I put this on my credit card. All right, and I can enter that information in here. The other alternative is to go ahead and let's see if it's set up here. You can see enter credit card. I can actually download the activity, the entire activity for an entire month directly into QuickBooks. And this is a great time saver. But again, once again, you have to remember that this is another level of complexity. So you want to make sure as you're going along that you're feeling comfortable about this. You're doing your bank recs. That would be the next step, to do your bank recs. You're looking at your reports for customers and payables if you're going to be using accrual system. And the next step in that line would be using the payables and receivables. So those are the things that you need to look out for. You need to go slowly, start out over in this system here, and most likely you'll start to wanting to send out invoices to your clients, which is fine. And remember that QuickBooks offers templates so that you can change the formatting on how your invoice looks. You can download templates, manage your templates, and preview them. You can move these things. Maybe you don't need a P.O. box number, so you can eliminate that. So you have a lot of flexibility in the presentation of your invoices. But the main thing is to start out slowly, adjust your chart of accounts where you need to, and then make sure you take a look at your reports, do your bank reconciliation once a month, and manage your company. And I wish you the best in your future with QuickBooks. And if you do have any issues, please feel free to call. I should mention that we are an accounting firm. My name is Arthur Lander. I'm at 703-486-0700. And it's not necessarily that you be in our location. I'm here in Arlington, Virginia, for us to do your QuickBooks accounting. We can do QuickBooks accounting if you're located in Montana or Missouri, mainly because we're able to get, with the client's permission, access to their bank accounts where we just have permission to look at the data. We get the information from the paychecks or payroll ADP firm. And then, of course, we can also get access to the credit card information so that all of this can be downloaded and reconciled without us being just 2 blocks down the street from you. I hope this has been helpful today, and I wish you well. Thank you. Bye-bye.